Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Amazing ikhwan. Inshallah, we are continuing with the discussion pertaining to the teachings that form the foundational base upon which one's Islam is built. And as we have said in the past, inshallah, those teachings are known to us as the 5 pillars of Islam. The first one we said is Shahadati Allah ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. That is the Shahada. The second is Iqami Salah, establishing the Salah. The third is Ita is Zakah, giving Zakah and charity. And the fourth we said is Sawmi Ramadan, fasting the month of Ramadan. That is the month that we are in at the moment. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the success of this month. Amazing. And the last and final pillar of Islam, inshallah, we said is Hajj al-Bayt. Is Hajj, the pilgrimage to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in the previous weeks, inshallah, we discussed the Shahada together with the conditions attached to it in detail. So inshallah today we are going to be looking at the second pillar of Islam, which is establishing the prayer, establishing Salah. Now ikhwan, this refers to the 5 daily repeated prayers at fixed times. 5 daily repeated prayers at fixed times. I think it is important, ikhwan, that we keep this in mind, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, Inna salata, surely the salah, kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawqutan. Surely salah upon the believers has been prescribed, meaning it is fard. It is compulsory. This means whether a person feels like making it or the person doesn't feel like making it, they have to make it. Whether the wisdom behind the salah is understood or it is not, it's got to be done. Whether it makes sense to us or it doesn't make sense, amazing ikhwan, is got to be done. Mawqutan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also clarifies it to saying, as much as it has been prescribed, one cannot now come and say, Salah is farad upon me, I'll make it. But what I will do is, because I tend to have a pretty busy days, when I get up in the morning, the first thing that I do is I'm going to do all my 5 salawat one time. Then that way I know for the rest of the day, inshallah, I am free, from the obligation of making salah. Amazing ikhwan, it doesn't work like that. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it, is kitaban, prescribed, mawqutan, upon specific and fixed times. So this means I cannot now come and make a salah whenever I feel like it. Amazing. I have to wait for each salah specific time to come in, then only can I make that particular salah. Together, isn't it, ikhwan? Amazing. And what is also nice, for Allah to have made it fard and compulsory upon us, it is because, ikhwan, think about this. Imagine if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had left it for me and you to decide when to want to make a salah, or perhaps to make a salah when we feel like it. I mean, how often does a person feel like making salah? Amazing. You go to the people of other faith besides Islam, you ask them, when was the last time they ever went to church or they prayed? Listen, some of them, they can hardly even remember. Amazing. Is this, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for His creation's relationship with Him to be? Amazing. That's not the case at all. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the golden opportunity to maintain that connection with Him at all times. Amazing. This is why whether you feel like it or you don't feel like it, it's got to be made. You are happy, you are sad, you are hungry, you are poor, you're rich, you're successful, listen, salah is got to be made. Like it or not, it's got to be made. The wisdom is understood or it is not understood. The language used in salah is understood or it's not. Listen, it's got to be made. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given a directive, and the directive is got to be complied with from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without questioning, as we have noted in the previous weeks, inshallah. Amazing, ikhwan. Here's another important point that we would want to make mention of tonight, and that is a lot of our Muslim brothers and sisters, ikhwan, today don't make salah at all. Don't make salah at all. And for many reasons, inshallah. But the one, common reason among all of them, inshallah, it is that they haven't really understood what is meant for them to achieve through the salah. They don't make salah today. Why? Because they don't understand what is meant for them to achieve with the salah and the prayer that they are making. Amazing. Some people, this is why you find that a lot of us at times we feel like salah is a burden, not realizing that is not the case. It's amazing, ikhwan. Not realizing that is not the case. And that is because we have not understood what salah is meant for. And inshallah, this is something, that we are going to be discussing tonight. Some people, some of the causes that has led to them neglecting and abandoning the salah, it is because they make this salah hoping for a better life. Making salah so they can get a job, for instance. Making salah so their business can boom and prosper. Amazing. If if these are the reasons for which you are performing salah, my brothers, my sisters, allow me to inform you that you've been making the gravest mistake. Because what happens is, the minute that money doesn't come, what then happens? You abandon the salah, you neglect it because you see no benefit. You begin to consider it useless. And which is not true at all. If that money doesn't come, salah, you don't really see the value in it anymore. And this understanding, ikhwan, is a wrong understanding. Listen to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what the purpose for this salah is. In Surah Taha, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِي. Amazing. Establish the prayer for my remembrance. Establish the prayer for you to remember me at all times. Establish the prayer for you to be constantly conscious of the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Amazing. There is a famous hadith known to us as the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam. It's a very long hadith. Insha'Allah, I am going to go to the point of my focus tonight. And that is, one time Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is sitting in the masjid together with his companions. Or rather, he's sitting together with his companions. Whether in the masjid or elsewhere, I cannot remember exactly, insha'Allah. Amazing, Allah forgive me. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is sitting with his companions, and suddenly somebody walks in. And this person walks in, his clothing white. Amazing. One thing is they notice is this is somebody who is not from the area. And because of that, they can tell this is somebody who has traveled from afar. However, what was amazing about this individual that just walked in upon them is there was no impressions of this person having traveled because his clothes were on point. Amazing. So this individual then walks in, to the gathering, and he sits directly in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and begins to ask him questions. Amazing. And he asks questions, and when the answer is given by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he then affirms the answer to the question given. Amazing. This is something that was shocking to the companions as well. Nonetheless, among the things that he asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, Mal ihsan? What is ihsan? In response, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then says it to him, Al ihsanu. Ihsan is an ta'budallaha ka'annaka tarahu. فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say to this individual, Ihsan is for you to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as though you see Him. If you cannot get yourself to this level, then when you pray to Him, you should know fully well that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you. Amazing, ikhwan. And then it's a very lengthy hadith. At the end of it, this individual leaves. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then asks the companions to say, do you know who this was? They said, no, Ya Rasulullah, we don't know who this individual is. He says, ذاك Jibreel. That was Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam. يُعَلِّمُكُمْ دِينَكُمْ. He has come to teach you your religion. Amazing. So what is Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam teaching us with the salah specifically pertaining to ihsan? He says, Ihsan is for you to worship Allah as though you see Him. So salah, it's not meant for me and you to become rich. It's not meant for me and you not to have problems in this life. Remember that. Amazing. وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِ. Make salah for my remembrance. Ihsan, ikhwan, ihsan. Make salah as though you see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, be conscious of Him. If you cannot make a salah as though you see Him, فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ, then you should know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you. So the minute you say, Allahu Akbar, know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you. If you cannot perform that salah as though you are seeing Him, be conscious of Him. Be conscious of Him. Do you know what happens when one becomes conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You want the good life. You want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make a way out for you of the problems that you may have in this life. Salah in and of itself, it's not meant to give you that. But what salah does is it trains you, inshallah, to achieve a level of taqwa. And once you have the taqwa and the consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the direct and immediate result of the taqwa is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open your doors. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. He who has a taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We've said this multiple times, ikhwan. And inshallah, this is something that we are going to be stressing upon up until it gets into our minds and heads. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes a way out for you. Amazing, ikhwan. So you want your problems, inshallah, to disappear. Salah in and of itself wasn't meant for that. But salah is meant to conscientize you of Allah. And once you become conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does amazing things in your life. Wallahi, trust me. This is what the teachings of Islam, teaches us, inshallah. Amazing, ikhwan. There is a very beautiful hadith, and in this hadith Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in fact, is known as hadithun qudsi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to me and you. He says, and it's a stern warning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives. He says, Man aada li waliyan faqad aadhantuhu bil harb. Whosoever harms my wali, my brothers, My sisters, you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you whatever you want, whenever you want it. Listen to this hadith. Listen to this hadith. Man aada li waliyan faqad aadhantuhu bil harb. Whosoever harms my wali, whosoever harms my wali, then I declare war against such an individual. I declare war against such an individual. Now, ikhwan, growing up into the religion of Al-Islam, whenever the term wali, was mentioned to us, the meaning that was embedded into our minds, or the meaning or the picture that was painted for us about a wali was one that was not easily achievable. Because the understanding that we were told or given about who the wali is that is a person who is very pious, a person who doesn't laugh loud, he only smiles, a person who has a turban, a long beard, a massive tasbih in his hand, when he walks, he looks down on the ground. Amazing. Some pious individual who is completely detached from this world. Amazing. But ikhwan, wallahi, we want to tell you that this picture that was painted to me and you for the longest of time is nonsense. That's not who a true wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran describes it to me and you what or who a wali is. He says, Allah, lo and behold, inna awliya Allah, surely the awliya of Allah, la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun, there shall be no fear upon them, nor shall they become sad. But the question, ya Allah, is, who are these awliya? Who is a wali? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the same verse, he says, describing this wali to me and you, he says, alladhina amanu wa kanu yattaqun. Listen to this, ikhwan. Taqwa, iman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the awliya of Allah are those who have iman, belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ, and they have the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have the constant consciousness of the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not this picture that has been painted in our minds forever. A wali, if you have iman, which I want to believe that we have, ikhwan, iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and taqwa, consciousness of the existence of Allah, ihsan, when we make his salah, Allahu Akbar, know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you. Know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears you. Know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything there is to know about you. If you cannot get to the level of you making salah as though you see him, then you should know that he sees you. Amazing. Either way, salah, it's meant to train me and you to become conscious of Allah. وَأَقِيمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِ. And salah wasn't necessarily in and of itself meant to give me money. Amazing. It's not meant for that. Taqwa. And then we said the direct fruits, inshallah, of this taqwa is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes a way out for you of any problem. وَيَرْزُقُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall provide for you, from avenues and from means that you never imagined. وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. And whosoever put their reliance and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is enough and sufficient for them. Amazing, ikhwan. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this hadith it says, Man aadali waliyan faqad aadhantuhu bil harb. Whosoever harms my wali, then I declare war against such an individual. Amazing, ikhwan. Amazing. The wali. That could be me. That could be you. Iman and taqwa, that's all it takes. Not a buzruk type of an individual. Amazing. He could also be a wali, but not the picture that, has been painted to us. Me and you. Wilaya of Allah, wallahi, it is something achievable. It is reachable. Just don't allow nobody to ever take that away from you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it easily accessible to us, inshallah. So whoever harms his wali, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares war against him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then in this hadith continues to say, he says, وَمَا تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيَّ عَبْدِي بِشَيْءٍ أَحَبَّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّا افْتَرَضْتُ عَلَيْهِ. And my servant doesn't come closer to me with anything more than that which I have made compulsory upon him. Salah, ikhwan, it is not meant to make you and me rich. But salah is fard. It is meant to conscientize us of Allah. It is meant for us to remember Allah. In this hadith, it is likewise meant to bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Amazing, we are following, ikhwan, isn't it? Wallahi, a lot of our Muslim brothers and sisters have left salah. Why? Because they misunderstood what is it that they are meant to achieve with this salah. Consciousness of Allah, remembrance of Allah, closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So once a person gets closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what then happens? What is the benefit? Amazing, let us continue in this hadith. Allah says, my servant does not come close to me with anything more than the things that I have made compulsory upon him. And salah, it's one of those that Allah has made compulsory upon us, ikhwan. We need to make salah in order to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But does it end there? Ya Allah, I want my life to be easy. Amazing, Ya Allah, I want when I lift up my hands in this month of Ramadan, I want when I lift up my hands, Ya Allah, and make a dua to you, you grant to me whatever it is that I may be asking you from, I may be asking from you, asking you for, that is permissible, insha'Allah, and halal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then continues, he says, وَلَا يَزَالُ عَبْدِي يَتَقَرَّبُ إِلَيَّ بِالنَّوَافِلِ. And he says, my servant continues to draw even closer to me by performing optional deeds, by performing voluntary deeds. Now, these are deeds that are not compulsory. A person does this out of their own personal will, without being compelled by anything or anyone. They do it acknowledging that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is my creator, and besides him there is no one for me to turn to. Amazing. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, my servant continues to draw even more closer to me by performing the nawafil. This is going over and above what's expected of you. Amazing. What happens, ikhwan, when you go the extra mile? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, my servant, continues to draw closer to me with this nawafil, to the point that I begin to love him, hatta uhibbahu, until I love him. فَإِذَا أَحْبَبْتُهُ, and when I have loved him, do you know what happens when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has loved you? كُنْتُ سَمِعَهُ الَّذِي يَسْمَعُ بِهِ, I become his hearing with which he hears. وَبَصَرَهُ الَّذِي يُبْصِرُ بِهِ. I become his sight with which he sees. وَيَدَهُ الَّتِي يَبْطِشُ بِهَا. I become his hand with which he touches. وَرِجِلَهُ الَّتِي يَمْشِي بِهَا. And I become his leg with which he walks. What is the benefit? One of the benefits of all of this, ikhwan. وَلَئِن سَأَلَنِي. When my servant asks of me anything at all, لَأُعْطِيَنَّهُ. I will most definitely, surely grant it to him. وَلَئِنِ اسْتَعَاذَنِي. And when my servant asks of me for protection, لَأُعِيذَنَّهُ. My brothers, my sisters, you want that VIP protection, especially in a country such as this of ours, such as South Africa, this beautiful country of ours. We don't feel safe, ikhwan. We don't feel safe. Our Muslim brothers and sisters are being kidnapped every day. They are being robbed in their businesses. We are being attacked in our own houses and premises. Amazing. You want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's VIP protection. Wallahi, do the fara'id. After the fara'id, perform the nawafil, optional deeds. So much so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you, these are the fruits. Whatever you want, wallahi, Allah promises, guarantees you, in fact. He guarantees to give that to you. So this means Salah is fard. Salatul Fajr, you don't just make Salatul Fajr up and gone. No. That it is not going to be giving you the results that you want, inshallah. Yes, it is going to get you closer to Allah, but perhaps not to the point where Allah begins to give you whatever you want whenever you want it. Amazing. If you want to get to that level, you then have to couple that fard with the nawafil. So Salatul Fajr, fard, amazing, do that. It conscientizes you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It draws you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But over and above that, you perform the 2 sunnah raka'at of Salatul Fajr. Before Salatul Fajr, and then after Salatul Fajr, you then sit and make adhkar. Inshallah, you do that. Amazing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says you are in the path for Allah to loving you. And once He loves you, listen, lift up your hands, ask Him for whatever you want. He has guaranteed to give it to you. Amazing. Amazing. It makes sense, ikhwan, isn't it? So this is the biggest mistake that we have been making, that we misunderstood what is it that we are meant to achieve with this salah. Yeah, so we learned, inshallah, that salah, a person is continuously reminded of his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and his true purpose of life is then revitalized, ikhwan. So this is why it is imperative that these salawat, are observed in their designated times, except of course where valid concessions are made. We know a concession such as when a person is traveling, we know that a person is then given concession to make a salah outside its fixed times. For example, a person is given concession to make salatul dhuhri at the time of salatul asri, or salatul asri at the time of salatul dhuhri, and maghrib and isha exactly the same way. This is the only time that a person has been given concession to make a salah outside its fixed time. Besides this, we have to be making salah at its specified and fixed times. Amazing. Inshallah, ikhwan, I think that's that about the salah, the second pillar of Islam. And I think up until here, it should be enough for tonight. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Muhammad. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.